I'm going to share with you something from my teacher, Nisargadatta, to kick off this exploration. He's telling his student that you need the courage to let go. And his student says, I admit it is courage that I lack. And Nisargadatta says, complete conviction generates both desire and courage. And meditation is the art of achieving faith through understanding. I'm going to say that again. Meditation is the art of achieving faith through understanding. In meditation, you consider the teaching received in all its aspects and repeatedly until out of clarity, confidence is born. And with confidence, action. Conviction and action are inseparable. If action does not follow conviction, examine your convictions. Don't accuse yourself of lack of courage. Self-deprecation will take you nowhere. Without clarity and emotional assent, of what use is will? There's a little bit more there that I'm going to return to as the student responds with a question that I think is a good one. But I just want to speak a little bit about what he's saying here. I find this really powerful, right? And he's really talking about a combination of meditation and inquiry. But I love this, that meditation is faith achieved through understanding. It means that our faith, which is often considered sort of a matter of the heart, is aligned with the reasoning of the mind. For me, meditation in combination with inquiry, what we're doing here, asking these questions, picking up words written by really wise people who've come before us and exploring and contemplating really deeply what it is that they're saying. A big part of what he teaches is when you find someone really trustworthy, when you find someone whose wisdom feels very resonant with you, listen, and then take that inquiry, in and on. If I were to distinguish meditation and inquiry, right, I would say that meditation is the art of being present for one's direct experience of life. It's the time when we cultivate this most powerful aspect of self-awareness. The things that we see in meditation, the things that we experience in meditation, are almost impossible to experience in other times, even though they are, because they are the very things that are with us always, they become invisible to us. That's the nature of things, right? And so meditation is when we pause and allow ourselves to meet that which is most important, most constant, yet most overlooked. We are spending time with the self, as most of these gurus will call it, right? The self being that awareness and that sense of I amness. And then what we see is all the things that aren't the self. Our beliefs, our ways of relating to everything that comes and goes in life, our identities, our attachments. We can only start to see these things when we can pause and begin to see and experience what the self is. Then we start to get that clarity that Nisargadatta is talking about. But this other piece of inquiry, right? I would say that inquiry is the art of identifying the most important question or questions to ask. That's really important, right? Knowing the right question to ask, really important. But not only that, the art of inquiry extends beyond that, because it's also the art of approaching the questions and approaching the exploration for answers in such a way that we organically get led to revelations and transformations. But you see how these go together, right? You see that if we're doing a bunch of inquiry without any meditation, without cultivating awareness, we're not going to be able to ask the right questions, and we're not going to be able to be led to real answers. We're going to kind of fake it in a way, right? We're going to get to the same old answers, asking the same old questions, and not ever be really transformed by what we find. But together, when done with sincerity, right, meditation and inquiry together organically, inevitably lead us to certain upgrades in our wisdom, and ultimately in our way of living and our way of being in the world. And so this quote, to return to it, in this quote, he really talks about how that happens. And once we get really clear, this is me, this is not me. This is important. This is not important. Our clarity brings us confidence, and confidence pushes us into action. I so often struggle with not feeling like I have the energy to take certain actions, right? And what he's saying is that doesn't mean you're a coward, right? Look at your convictions. And this is what we do. This is what we do when we ask the questions of the coordinates, right? This is what we do every day when we meditate and we connect to care. And if your faith and your reason are at war, that's going to be the main cause of disturbance and suffering. And so what he's saying is, go ahead and examine, go ahead and look at what you really believe. And somewhere in there you'll find that there's a belief that is rubbing up against um, maybe what you want to believe. So that brings me to, well, let me just finish this. I think this is also important. The student asks, what do you mean by emotional assent, right? Because he says, without clarity and emotional assent, of what use is will. And Maharaj says, you will not act against your desires. Clarity is not enough. Energy comes from love. You must love to act, whatever the shape and object of your love. Without clarity and charity, courage is destructive. People at war are often wonderfully courageous, but what of it? Okay, so that example of going to war, right? Training ourselves, hardening ourselves to go and do something that feels so counter to our real desires as humans, right? That example, I think so many of us actually do that to ourselves throughout the day, even if it's not something as egregious as literally killing other people for whatever convictions the army signed us up for. He points out how destructive that is. Then that inner war becomes an outer war, and the outer war becomes an inner war. And so how am I applying this teaching? How am I playing with this teaching is noticing for myself, if I don't have the energy to act, if I feel lazy, if I feel disconnected from the task at hand, if I feel unable to be present, I may not be able to do this in that moment, but there's some inquiry work to do there. There's some examination to do. What here is actually going against my desire, my emotional body? if my emotional body is just shutting it down, my mind says, no, you have to do this, right? Why do you have to do it? And so my lessons of 2020 speak to this. A lot of the things that I have had to do, right, um, that have gone against my emotional assent and made me feel an inner war. I've come to understand a lot of why that is and how that works and where it comes from in this last year. I have been thinking a lot about what happens to those of us who live in a society where a lot of the values of the culture of the greater society are at odds with our own intuitive or developed sense of morality. And so much of and I've been just I feel like this I've personally come to see so much more with so much more clarity how injustice does work in our society and how it's played out. I feel like I've come to understand really deeply how privilege works and how it's worked in my life when you have a society, a hierarchical society like the one that we have, where there are some members of society considered to be really valuable and then others that are considered not so valuable. It creates it creates a situation where that emotional assent just simply cannot be present for a great majority of people most of the time. I've come to see how my own types of privilege that I've had have served me in certain ways, but have also kept me blind and ignorant, have kept me feeling separate or superior at times when that was just false. I have come to understand through a lot of different things that have happened on in the collective, but also all these things that have happened to me in my personal life. I've come to see that living in a society where people tend to want to kind of escape up into some kind of higher echelon and sort of leave behind or close behind that their gilded door, and not look at those that struggle, those that are not as privileged. I realized that for a lot of my life, I was doing that. And that this year for me has been extremely humbling. And though at times I've really resisted being humbled in that way, I have found that I have so much more of a sense of peace than I did at the beginning of this year. Last week, I gave you guys a quote, which was from Nisargadatta about the real release, right? That the peace that we're looking for really comes when we realize that there's nothing to give up because nothing was mine, nothing belonged to me. And all of this sort of all of this energy that I had been putting toward kind of running away from the things I didn't want to see in this world and hiding behind a door and kind of just like wrapping myself up in the comfort of my privileges, seeing how much that was actually keeping me in a constant state of fear and a constant feeling of sort of war. I feel much more at home everywhere that I go and much more connected with everyone that I meet. And as I have lost, is what I've let go of is a lot of attachment, and a lot of stories about myself being this kind of special person. I have also lost, I've seen dissolve a lot of these false, um, I've seen a lot of these false beliefs that I had and kind of false hopes that I had that maybe I was going to escape some of these tougher aspects of humanness, right? Because don't I have the privilege, right? Don't I have that opportunity? And realizing that it was the running away from these harder aspects of humanness that was actually causing the deeper suffering. And I have lost a lot of fear. What I have gained, um, this enormous amount of peace, as I'm describing, perspective, um, this understanding, this ability to understand what is important and what's not, an enormous amount of compassion. I understand much, much better how things go when you don't have privilege, when you don't have economic privilege, when you don't have a situation where that's really cushy. And I have such a deep amount of compassion now for how the majority of the planet lives, right? With very few material resources. And how, yeah. So that compassion is really, really strong for myself and others. And something else that I've gained that I'm really proud of in this last year is a really, really finely attuned, very strong, sensitive bullshit meter. I, um, my ability to, and I don't, I actually, I really, whatever you value, great. Whatever your beliefs are, great. They can be different than mine. What I am now set up to really have a capacity to feel when I'm engaged with somebody or reading something or, in any way taking in somebody else's expression and presence is whether there's integrity. Are you going to stand by that belief? Or can you go all the way back to your conviction and examine that? Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to show up as awareness and inquiry, as meditation and inquiry, right? You can get totally different answers than me, but are you willing to show up for the process of life and look with your own eyes and admit with honesty what you find? Sveta wanted me to talk a little bit more about the conviction that the quote was mentioning, and I guess I already am, and this is the last, this is how I'll wrap. Yeah, thank you for the question, Sveta. I love what he says. He talks a lot about love and action. And here he brings it up again. Action comes from love. And so one way is, okay, if I'm acting, when I'm acting, what is it that life is trying to love through that action? How is love moving through it? If I can't get it together to take an action, if I keep, small example, putting off that call to that relative who sent me that nice card or whatever, from small to large, right? Some of my stumbling blocks with my own work. There are things that I'm like, I should, right? If I can't show up for an action, why isn't love coming to the table? Why isn't love moving me in that direction? And so here he's reminding us that that emotional assent, that he's reminding us that the point of meditation and inquiry and getting enlightened is not to dominate our hearts and our bodies with our minds. It's not to push ourselves into a war because that's what we're supposed to do, right? So someone, you can't make someone be convinced, right? I don't have that. I'm so glad I don't have that power, right? Every individual has to come to that conviction on one's own. And I really do believe, Sveta, that what he's saying is that to do that requires this showing up, right? It requires exactly what you guys are doing, looking and then looking again and then looking again, and being willing to investigate some of the things that we are attached to. See, this is scary. You know, maybe my marriage isn't actually good for me or healthy for me. That was a really, really scary thing to admit. To even start asking certain questions was already me letting go of some of my attachments. And I do believe that this is the way, this is the most peaceful way. This is the way to to move forward into the person, who we want to be, while keeping everybody caring, keeping all the inner selves caring for one another, body, heart, and mind. Okay, any other questions or anything else that anyone wants to hop in with before we wrap for today? Again, we'll get to have a nice session together next Wednesday night. Um, I'm hoping that you'll be there for that. And yeah, and I'll be posting more about how to invite in friends, hopefully making that really easy for you for the January challenge. Beautiful. Okay. So much love to you all. Yes, Pam, you can come a little late on Wednesday. Yeah, absolutely. No problem. We look forward to seeing you when you can come. Yes, happy celebrations to everyone. Happy holidays. I will be meditating on silent meditation Friday morning, Christmas morning.